The wait is finally over. Sonic Superstars has released for some people. Well, the game will be out tomorrow, but by the time you're watching this, probably you'll have already played it. The game is officially released, and a lot of people are kind of mixed on it. For the most part, I would say that as it currently stands, the Metacritic scores are pretty solid. As of October 16, 2023, we have a 76 on Metacritic, which is generally favorable. Keep in mind, this game is now higher rated than Sonic Frontiers. It's close to Sonic Colors, which is one of the greatest rated 3D Sonic games of all time, and it's even 1 point below Sonic Generations, and there's still a lot of reviews that are still going to pour in for the game, so it could go either way. It could even raise up a little bit higher. The general score for this game, though, is pretty much set in stone. We're looking at a very high, strong 7.7. Let's round it up to like an 8 out of 10. This is actually a very good score. It's on par with some of the highest rated Sonic games in the entire franchise. First and foremost, as Sonic fans, we have to stop gaslighting ourselves, and honestly, the game reviewing culture in general. We have to stop gaslighting ourselves into thinking that an 8 out of 10 game is bad. First of all, that is not bad. It's in the green for a reason. Sonic Superstars is a very solid game, and it's certainly a welcome addition and a worthy successor to the classic Sonic games. With that being said, I will give my thoughts today, and I'm not going to be very structured with this. Again, this is unscripted review. This is just my thoughts on the game. I'm not quite a game critic. I'm pretty binary with the games. I either like them or I don't, but I'll give you guys my full thoughts on it. Played through the game twice and beat it, so let's get into the review. But before we do that, please subscribe to the channel with all notifications. I'll give you a second to do that. Do it! Just do it! And hopefully you guys like the video as well, but let's get into our review of Sonic Superstars. So at its core, Sonic Superstars is the traditional 2D classic Sonic platformer, although I would say the physics are not maybe one-to-one with something like a Sonic Mania or a Sonic 2. It's basically right there though. Trust me, this is no Sonic 4. So it's not quite Sonic Mania in terms of control, but make no mistake, the controls for this game are very good. They're very responsive, and just based off of like the history of the Sonic franchise, you have to say that this game actually has some of the best controls in the entire series. You're not going to find many people complaining about the controls of the game, but overall, you are thrusted right into the action with a very good aesthetic in the background. I would say there's one thing that this game nails. It definitely nails the visuals and the environments. Sonic is probably one of the hardest players to play in the game because he doesn't have really additional movement sets other than the drop dash, which seems like it's heavily nerfed. If you look right there, although I was picking up a lot of speed, the drop dash can sometimes slow down your momentum. It's more so used situationally, which is a lot different than a Sonic Mania. Each level seemingly has its own unique gimmick or mechanic that feels very specific to each zone, and this idea that this game does not innovate or add anything new to the classic formula is just absolute garbage. Whether it's rail grinding in Speed Jungle, shooting Sonic like a bullet in these sections in the Sky Sanctuary type zone, using a giant snake to gain momentum and reach heights that you otherwise would not be able to, being a drill like Sonic Colors, or running upside down to change the level design, you will find that every single zone offers something a little bit more unique than the last one that we haven't seen in previous classic Sonic games. So the idea that there's nothing new or innovative about this game just because it's a 2D classic Sonic game could not be further from the truth. But back to the playable characters. So you have a hub world where you can actually swap between whichever character that you choose throughout the story, seamlessly allowing you to try different playstyles. Like typical classic Sonic games, you could also play as Tails, who has the ability to fly. Overall, it's probably a little bit easier than playing like a character like Sonic, who's very limited with his moveset. Again, Knuckles the Echidna is also a playable character who is once again has his ability to glide, which will give you a fun way to traverse around levels, and in addition to that has his signature climbing ability, which will allow you to find new places to explore in levels. Although he was never really my favorite character to play as ever in a classic Sonic game, you can definitely appreciate his ability to have new places to explore, with again more movement options in Sonic. And basically for the first time ever, Amy Rose, well technically she was playable in Sonic Origins as well, but for the first time ever in 2023 this year, you're able to play as Amy Rose, who has a very fun double jump ability, which honestly in a 2D platformer, I think a double jump actually provides a lot more utility than any of the characters' abilities, minus Tails, who has the flying ability, which is similar. But Amy Rose has the double jump, which allows you to really maintain your speed better and give you a more efficient way to navigate through levels. In addition to that, she has a hammer ability, which replaces the drop dash for Sonic, which allows her to just spam her hammer attack, which will take out anything in her path. Overall, she's probably one of the most fun characters to play as, surprisingly, just like in Sonic Frontiers Update 3. So the core gameplay gimmick of this game is giving the Chaos Emeralds, for the first time ever, actual use and abilities other than going supersonic at the end of the game. Being useless like the Chaos Emeralds is definitely something I can relate to because as a Sonic tuber, my parents say the same thing about me. For example, you have the ability to stop time right here with one of the emeralds, which is honestly one of the more like useless power-ups. Sometimes you forget that these are even here. You have a little spin wheel with all the abilities that you can use. For example, if you want to grow a giant vine, you can go up here. Look at that. This is something honestly I don't find that useful. It's nice to have some of that situational stuff in the game, although sometimes you may find it a little bit pace breaking. You have another ability which allows you to traverse through water or go up waterfalls. Typically, this ability is something you'll definitely forget is here, but it is pretty useful for the Lagoon City water level. But overall, it is pretty forgettable. And one of the most annoying things about the emeralds overall is if you get hit while you have them active, you lose your ability, especially if it's one that's fun, that's helping you out. Getting hit by sometimes just seemingly misplaced enemies that are just there to trick you can be extremely frustrating. One of the best power-ups though, and I gotta say this is the most useful one, especially if you're Sonic, is definitely this one right here. I don't know what it's called. It's one of the emeralds that allows you to basically shoot up like a homing attack for Sonic, and it's going to allow you to do a lot of shortcuts and traverse through the levels a lot easier when some of those movement options aren't really available for this character. But again, if you get hit, it's gone. Very frustrating and very annoying. One of your emerald abilities, if you look right here, will actually give you the ability to spawn platforms. This is something, again, that I personally did not use that much. Really did not find that useful, especially because half the time the platforms don't even appear, but it will help you find some secret stuff. As you saw right there, I didn't even find anything. So you have also the ability to go super if you want. You have a unique power-up if you looked right here. That's going to be specific to each character. Going super is obviously very cool and is very helpful, but that's not something you're going to get until later on in the game. But the first ability which you get very early on in the game is to spawn clones of yourself, and these clones will actually help you with boss battles, which is very fun and very helpful. This is one of the few that are actually like something you're going to find yourself using often, because overall, I mean, it's very situational as to when you'll use these, but the one that shoots you up to attack and the one that spawns clones are the two that are going to be very useful throughout your journey. But overall, it's optional. You don't need to use these, but these definitely could have been a little better. I'm not going to hate on the game because of them, because I do think they are pretty useful for the most part. And if they're not, you don't need to use them. They're more situational. The level design in the game is among some of the classic series best because there's a lot of variety with them. And in typical classic Sonic fashion, you will have to take the upper path, and the more you memorize these levels, the more you play them, the better you will get and the more speed you can pick up. People like IGN have no idea how to play Sonic games, and they consider that a flaw, but clearly it's a lack of understanding of the series in general, because overall, you can really pick up some speed in these bad boys. Levels like Lagoon City Act 1 are some of my favorite levels that I've ever played in the entire series and truly exemplifies what I love about classic Sonic gameplay, and that is, in its core, going fast, but clearly rewarding skilled players for memorizing the levels, a bunch of spectacle, as you see right here, and right here as well, and being able to abuse momentum in order to gain some shortcuts as well. It makes Lagoon City Zone a perfect example of what I love about this game. Another thing that's absolutely awesome about this game and really true to the classics is just the sheer amount of paths that you can take in the game. It feels like there's so many different routes. Like you can go up, you can go down, you can go in the middle, you can go like the semi-middle. For every single level, it seems like this game was built for players to replay it over and over and over again. So that is something I can definitely appreciate about it. Here's another thing I really like about the game, and this is going to be a spoiler, so you have like 2 seconds to click off the video or pause or skip to the next section. Okay, are you still here? All right. After you beat the game, you'll get a pretty underwhelming ending that leads you to believe, like, wait, is this it? And then you actually unlock Trip as a playable character, which she has a brand new story. In typical Sonic Heroes fashion, all this is literally just playing the game all over again on basically a hard mode with a new character. So a lot of fans might actually hate this because in order to get the true ending, you have to replay the game with a new character. Although what I'll say is this, Trip is actually the most fun character to play as in the game. So basically, she's a combination of Amy with a little bit of Knuckles. So she has an ability to double jump, and the double jump is very good, and it's going to allow you to really, again, maintain momentum much better than a character like Sonic. It's going to be a lot harder. You have to wonder if an ability like a double jump is absolutely necessary to a 2D platformer because it just makes the game that much better. It's so much more fun to play as her than it is for Sonic, in my opinion, especially with how weak the drop dash is. She has the same core moveset as the other characters. She has a spin dash and stuff like that, but she is so fun to play. She sticks up against the walls, kind of similar to one of the Wisps in Sonic Colors. Clearly, this game had a lot of inspiration from it. So she can climb up walls like Knuckles, but a lot faster. She can jump up on the wall multiple times, so her speed of climbing is a lot quicker. So she's more fun to play than Knuckles, and obviously more fun to play than Amy because while she has the same double jump, she also has the wall climbing ability. So by far, I think the most fun character to play as. I thought it was going to be a chore to replay the game, but I actually found it to be a lot more fun, and I found a lot more routes and paths to take. Playing as Trip was an absolute pleasure and a joy and a blast, and I'm happy that they put in a new character in the game with new abilities. Even some of the later game stages are actually pretty good for a classic Sonic game. Typically, towards the end, I do find them to be weaker, like Metropolis Zone and Sonic 2. But when I'm playing the end of the game, I think about levels like Frozen Base Zone, where if you look right here, I'm able to do like really big jumps based off of the conveyor belts and being able to change their directions, which again is another really unique and interesting mechanic. To say that there's none of this in this game is just absolutely false. A level like this is really fun for end game type stuff when the game's supposed to get really difficult and frustrating. Not to say that it doesn't doesn't get like that, but this game definitely is worthy amongst all of the classic Sonic games, which are typically always good, and the reviews of this game are good, so stop freaking out about a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. There's nothing to be ashamed about with that. So there truly is a lot to love about this game. It has everything that you would want in a classic Sonic game. At its core, it will appeal to casual and hardcore Sonic fans alike. It's hard to really see this game as anything other than a win for Sonic fans. This is the same series that produced Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, Sonic Forces, and games like Sonic Lost World. So a game like Superstar should be viewed as an absolute win. So why aren't the review scores 10 out of 10? Why aren't they 9 out of 10 like a typical Sonic game, like a Sonic Mania or something of that nature? And that is where some of the criticism of this game comes into play, because it is not a perfect game, which is okay. We have to talk about the elephant in the room of something that really holds this game back, and that is the boss battles. That is something that is so egregious. My biggest criticism of the game is the fact that these boss battles are largely, well, they're actually really inconsistent. It's so weird. These are simultaneously some of the most unique and creative classic Sonic bosses ever. Actually, I'll just go ahead and say it right here. A lot of the mechanics in these bosses are definitely the most creative you'll ever find in a classic Sonic game, but also at the same time, they can be so frustratingly bad. For example, the Fang boss fight. This is the boss fight that will take you longer than the actual level that you played. And a lot of the boss battles, not even this boss battle as an example, which is one of the last in the game, and it's against the big villain that they hyped up. I understand this one being long, but there's many frustrating instances where you're just sitting there waiting for the boss to attack you and you can't do anything but sit there and wait. And if you grind out 4 or 5 minutes, 6 minutes on the boss just to let your eyes slip off the screen for a second at the end, well, guess what? Go f yourself. You got to do it all over again. I'm telling you, bro, whoever designed this final boss is an absolute demon, bro. The amount of times that I got 7 minutes into the level, one hit away from the boss, only to get some cheap death and have to repeat it all over again. I can go on and on about this final boss, but it's the final boss. It's supposed to be hard, whatever. It doesn't mitigate the awesome platforming and level design, and honestly, a lot of the fun that I had with the game. It's the final challenge for a reason. It is what it is. Definitely harder than Sonic Frontiers, though. I'm a grown man and I struggle with this boss, so I don't know how little Timmy is gonna fare any better. The final Eggman boss battle, as well as the Fang battle, are obviously the biggest offenders of this, but this is something you'll see throughout the game. It's very inconsistent with the difficulty of the bosses. For example, the Sand Zone boss, he's just sitting there in the background and you have to sit there and wait and wait and wait for your time to be able to strike him. But what happens if you're 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes into the boss battle and then you just, like, again, take your eye out the screen and you die? You literally have to do it all over again, and you're just sitting here waiting for these tedious moments to end. You have to just sit there and wait. This is not necessarily an issue of skill, because it's like you're just sitting there waiting. You know, if you fight a boss for 4 minutes and 59 seconds and you're cooking him, absolutely. You slip up at the 5th minute mark, which you're 1 hit away from beating the boss, and you have to do it all over again. Is that really a skill issue? It's like the Master King Coco trial in Sonic Frontiers. Like, after you slip up at the very last ending of the fight, you have to run through and do all the tedious, like, platforming sections again. Like, this is what I constitute as almost, it feels like they're padding the game out a little bit. They're trying to justify that $60 price tag, and I'll get into that a little bit later on in the video as well with some of the other tactics they use to do this, but it's just tedious. And what I would prefer is more skill-based boss battles. There are good bosses that rely on skill. For example, the boss in Golden Capital Zone, like the little pig where you have to flip the world upside down and kind of avoid his attacks, but you're not limited to just sitting there and waiting. You can kind of still sneak in an extra attack or two, are skill-based, and they actually don't take up that much time. This is good boss design right here. The first boss, again, has ways that you can sneak in an extra attack or two, which has always been kind of like the staple of classic Sonic boss fighting, which has never been like truly that strong. But if you're good enough at the game, you can use the Emerald powers to kind of sneak an extra attack in here and there. Like the first boss in Lagoon Zone, you can actually hit him and not just sit there and wait for the window forever, and then just, like, it's so punishing if you die, which makes it really frustrating. Stuff like this has been a staple of the Sonic series in the past. You think of the Sonic 2 final boss. You don't even have to spam the invincibility frames. If you're skilled enough at the game, you can sneak in the extra hits and be a little bit risky in order to defeat the final boss, as opposed to just sitting there and waiting 3 minutes to attack it just one time. It really sucks the replayability out of the game. One of the things I did find annoying was the lack of item boxes that you could find throughout the game, and while I understand that the Chaos Emerald powers do largely replace a lot of this stuff, but due to the fact that there's no life boxes, Sonic himself has a pretty limited moveset, it would be nice to explore these levels, because these levels are definitely made for exploration, and actually find more, like, cool stuff to help you out throughout the game. Although it's been kind of streamlined with the Emerald power, so is it really the end of the world? No. Once you find all the emeralds, the exploration can feel just a little bit more pointless. The multiplayer is also something that's really chaotic, but it's also pretty fun. I'm not going to use this as something to, like, bash the game game with, because ultimately, how are you going to make a game like Sonic work in multiplayer going so fast and being on the screen at the same time? They do their best. I mean, the camera could be a little bit better for who it chooses to be on, but for the most part, it gives you the most options available, like being able to quickly swap between characters if you fall off the screen. I would say it's like pretty comparable to New Super Mario Bros. Multiplayer, and I love the fact that we even have the option to do it. So I'm not going to use this to hold it against the game, although I would say that the camera could definitely use some work, but they probably did the best that they could with a game that moves like this. So while it's not perfect, the multiplayer is still a W. It's still awesome that we even have this ability. And as great as I think the level design is in general a W in this game, but there are some annoying things, like if you look right here, that just really slow you down. It's like a lot of pace breaking stuff. And as you get into later stories, which I'll get into in a second, it seems like there's a lot of cheap deaths. For example, in the pinball level, there's a section when you're on these little roller coasters right here, and it seems like there's these like rite of passage kind of things where you have to die in a level like 4 times to actually understand what you're supposed to do. So stuff like that is not a big deal. I mean, again, my general consensus of the level design is good. It can get frustrating towards the end, especially when you consider like you have to run into something cheap and frustrating in order to understand what you're supposed to do. The cyber level has good examples of this as well. There's like a section when you're on the rocket and there's like an instant 1-kill death that literally a speed boost launches you into, so you think that you're going into the speed boost and then you die, and it's like, oh, I gotta do this again. Like, I have to literally die because I got tricked by the developers in order to understand the level. Like, that gets a little frustrating. In some levels, you really get hit a lot, like especially the cyber level towards the end. You're gonna find yourself just getting hit 24/7 by obstacles as opposed to going fast, so it can get a little bit annoying towards the end, although I do think the ending levels are pretty strong compared to previous classic Sonic games. Another really annoying thing is accidentally getting flung into some of these weird special stages. Like, you're going really fast and then boom, you just get flung into one of these stages. Huge pace breaker, and honestly, I don't actually know what these do. All I know is they really annoy me. I think they bring you into a different part of the level. I don't know. Also, I don't like how they abandoned the wall running mechanic. I thought it was really cool, and they only used it in Bridge Island. So yeah, those are the things I don't like about the game, and that's why I really can't put this game in that like 10 out of 10 range. Those are the things that hold this game back and why people don't consider this game better than Sonic Mania, although again, this is still a very, very solid game, certainly worthy, and it's better than games like Sonic CD and Sonic 1. There's a lot of fun to be had with this game, and truly I'm very appreciative that we got this, because again, the Sonic franchise needs this. So for me, I'm going to give this game an 8 out of 10. I'm so close to going into that 7.5 range because of how bad the boss battles are, but again, the meat of this game, the platforming levels, is really fun. Like, there's just so much to love about it, but there is a sad reality setting in for us that unfortunately we're gonna have to wait. I think due to the fact that this game won't score higher than Sonic Mania, and it definitely won't score higher than Super Mario Bros. Wonder due to whatever weird bias that there is against the Sonic franchise in general, there are some people that will be left disappointed overall, because we want a 10 out of 10 game, and it does feel like, you know, you look at the Gaming Jolt review where they gave Sonic Superstars a 50, that it doesn't feel fair, some of the criticism. But again, the fact that this won't score better than Super Mario Wonder leads me to believe that there may never be a time where a Sonic game does score better than a Mario game as far as platforming goes, which is sad because the series has so much potential, and it seemed like when this game was revealed, this was our moment to get that 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 game, but there's nothing to be ashamed about when getting an 8 out of 10 score. The fact that we as Sonic fans, after all that we've been through, can say that our game reviewed well in the year 2023, in the modern era, our game was received well overall. It's basically an 8 out of 10. We should be really proud because the future of the franchise is extremely bright, and I can't wait to see what they cook up next.